What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. Happy Labor Day, and also happy NFL kickoff week. Can't wait, guys. We are less than a week away from the New York Giants kicking off their season against the Minnesota Vikings. We got Thursday night football this week. We even got Friday night football this week, and of course Monday night as well. It's a packed weekend of football coming up. Not only NFL football, college football made its return this past weekend, and we want to discuss some of the college standout quarterbacks. And let me preface this by saying, Alex and I are in complete agreement. We want Daniel Jones to throw 45 touchdowns this year. We want him to be the MVP. We want him to win us a Super Bowl. But we have to recognize the reality of the situation. So while we are rooting for DJ, we want to take a look at college football quarterbacks because two things are true. One, the Giants did try to move on from Daniel Jones and draft a quarterback this offseason. You have to recognize that, and you have to understand Joe Schoen and the Giants are keeping a close eye on these quarterbacks. Number two, a lot of our fans and viewers of the channel, they want to see a quarterback drafted next year. So we want to do our due diligence, start preparing for the draft season now, so that when we get there later on, we are well informed and you viewers are also well informed. So we kind of want to do these little progress reports throughout the season, take a look at college football, some of the top quarterbacks, and just have in the back of our mind who could be selected if the Giants are in the market for a quarterback next season. And another thing to keep in mind, we don't only want to be prepared for the case of the Giants selecting a quarterback. What if Dak Prescott leaves in free agency and the Cowboys draft a quarterback? We want to have all this info gathered up because it's relevant to the Giants, whether they draft a QB, whether a division rival drafts a QB, whatever. Due diligence is always important. So we want to react to some of these top quarterbacks, the way that they performed this past weekend. As college football kicked off, there were some big names who took the field. Carson Beck from Georgia, he looked good. Of course, Cam Ward out of Miami, he lit it up. Drew Lock from Penn State had some good throws. Even Garrett Nussmeier from LSU came onto the scene and looked like a really good player. So there was a lot to talk about and unpack from this college football weekend. And again, we want to do our due diligence here, prefacing it by saying we're rooting for Daniel Jones and the Giants first and foremost, but we want to have some preparations going for the end of the season. We're going to go ahead and dive right into it. No need to extend this intro any longer. Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling? Less than a week away, NFL season, but also a really exciting weekend of college football just kicked off.
I'm doing great, man. And like you said, I want to preface this by saying, this entire series following the quarterbacks this season is going to be about gathering knowledge and giving you guys all the information possible to see, is there a quarterback we even like next year? We want Daniel Jones to succeed. We want the Giants to win football games. But I think it's always best to be prepared, Failing to prepare is preparing to fail, as they say. And I think that, the Giants were at this Georgia game against Clemson. They were watching Carson Beck. We know the Giants are there. They were watching a lot of these collegiate games over the weekend, so it's only fair that we do the same thing and do our due diligence, right? I think that's a kind of a fun thing, a fun series we're going to progress through as the college season kind of unfolds before us. And, the top quarterbacks, Shedeur Sanders and Drew Lock and, of course, Carson Beck and Cam Ward, we're going to talk about all these guys and really who stood out the most to us. Even Jalen Milroe, who oddly had 200 yards and 3 passing touchdowns on 7 completions. Unbelievable production if you look at it in that respect. But the sample's very small, and he ran for 77 yards and had 2 scores on the ground too. 5 total touchdowns from Jalen Milroe. Really, really interesting performance from him. But let's talk about Shedeur Sanders, Anthony, right off the bat. Obviously Colorado, they are running an offense with Travis Hunter that it is heavily predicated on Shedeur Sanders doing brilliant things, throwing from the pocket, throwing on the run, using his arm talent, using his athleticism, and having possibly the number 1 overall pick at his disposal. Travis Hunter could be either or next year in the draft, to be quite honest with you, Anthony. But, Sanders looks like a different type of player, at least from the early kind of signs of what he showed us in that first game. He put on a show, 445 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. Was one of the highest grade quarterbacks in the draft in this most recent week, obviously. 76.5% completion rate on 34 attempts, 26 completions. So it is quite evident to me that his father is giving him the sample size necessary for NFL teams to say, okay, we have a big body of film to look at. We're going to see tons of passing attempts, tons of running, tons of athleticism, tons of big money throws. And this is kind of where Deion Sanders is building up Shedeur at this point in time. He's trying to gather a sample to say to NFL teams, This isn't Jalen Milroe completing 7 passes. This is just Shedeur Sanders completing 26 for 445 yards and 4 touchdowns, right? This is a massive sample to look at, a massive sample for teams like the Giants who, might be interested in a player like this to say, well, we're not just looking at a sample of 100 completions. We're looking at a sample of 400 completions. And that's kind of, or really attempts, really. So I think it's a good thing if you're a team that is looking for a quarterback to see that much sample. Sanders was composed. He made a couple of monster throws with pressure in his face, took up a couple of big hits. The arm talent is there. The accuracy was there. The big money throws were there. The athleticism, the running qualities. This is a guy that could be the number 1 overall pick, Anthony. Looking at his performance, I was really, really impressed. We're not going to talk about his character. He obviously is very outspoken. There are some red flags. His dad is very outspoken. He comes with a whole posse. And that's okay. If you're going to be a star quarterback in New York, sometimes you got to have that energy, have that aura. But he's going to be outspoken. And the Giants, in one of the most dangerous media markets, they'll try to take advantage of him in bad performance. They'll try to take advantage of the things he will say after a big loss. So he has to be composed, has to be very humble and very, very, strategic in what he says. So I am interested to see how his maturity develops as the course of the season does progress here. But what did you think about his gameplay? I was impressed. Throwing from the pocket, making big throws with pressure in his face. I thought those were really positive signs from him and the growth as a player.
I thought he looked awesome, and it was exciting to see some of those big-time throws that he made, right? He had a few deep shots down the field to Travis Hunter, as you mentioned earlier. He threw one down the sideline without having his feet set. That was really, really impressive. Feet not set in the pocket, pressure's incoming, and he just flicked it with his wrist, and it was a dot deep down the field. He had a really statistically impressive performance as well, 445 yards and 4 touchdowns on 76.5% completion rate. That's excellent. He averaged 13 yards per attempt. Really good stuff there. And if you want to dive into the Pro Football Focus stats, he hit 5 big-time throws, which is the most out of any of the quarterbacks in college football who are draft eligible this season. 5 big-time throws, meaning 20-plus yards downfield, tight windows, NFL-level throws. That's how PFF kind of describes those passes to be. He hit 5 of them. Next best was Cam Ward with 4, who I'm excited to dive into in just a second. And he had 0 turnover-worthy plays, which is the big notable aspect. Shedeur Sanders, for any criticisms that you may or may not have of him, he's a weapon with his legs, he's got a cannon of an arm, and he's also a pretty good decision maker. He keeps the ball out of harm's way. Now, he's got a lot of talent around him, for sure, but he's also really talented himself. It was very exciting to see him get off to a really strong start with the 2024 college football season, hitting those big-time throws, keeping the ball out of harm's way, making plays. He didn't get pressured a whole lot, and that's something I'm going to keep an eye on for the rest of the season, Alex. He was pressured on only 8.3% of his dropbacks. He took a sack on those pressures. He was pressured only 12 times, though. And if you take a look at that, 12 pressures on 34 attempts, if you're playing for the New York Giants in the future, you could assume that you're going to be pressured more than 12 times on 34 dropbacks, right? So not a ton of pressure came his way. He played fine under the pressure, though. Again, 0 turnover-worthy plays, didn't have an interception or anything like that, and only took 1 sack. So he got the ball out of his hands quickly whenever he was pressured, but that's something I'm going to keep an eye on throughout this season. How does Shedeur Sanders respond when he starts to face more pressure? When the pressure gets really intense, what happens then? That's something that I do want to keep a close eye on throughout the season. But like you said, a really impressive first performance of the year from Sanders. Who knows how that's going to go throughout the rest of the season? Maybe he continues to boost his stock and becomes the number 1 pick. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. All I know is that this is a player that I'm keeping one of my closest eyes on for Shedeur Sanders throughout the year. Now, another player, Alex, that I want to dive into, I just mentioned him, Cam Ward. So, backstory on why I'm so excited about Cam Ward. Cam Ward did declare for the NFL draft last year, and he was a player who I was ready to stand up on this show on a soapbox and be like, that is the mid-round steal. Now, it ended up being Spencer Rattler, who goes in the 5th round of this year's draft to the New Orleans Saints. Maybe he ends up being the mid-round steal. Who knows? Maybe there isn't a mid-round steal. But I was really confident that had Cam Ward gone through with his declaration into the draft class, he would have been that mid-round steal. He ends up rescinding his declaration into the draft class, transfers to Miami. I wasn't crazy about that because Miami doesn't necessarily breed great quarterback talent. Not a lot of great talents from that position have come out of that college in recent years. But Cam Ward could be different because he had a couple of really solid seasons. Washington State looked like an absolute stud, cannon of an arm, playmaker, right? Now he transfers to Miami. How does that go? Goes up against Florida? absolutely wipes the floor with them. Those Gainesville Gators, they're not feeling so good because the Miami Hurricane rolled through and sent them packed up and going home really upset. So Cam Ward, what an incredible performance from him. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 385 yards on 26 completions on 35 attempts. Really impressive stuff, Alex. Like I said, I've been a big Cam Ward fan. He probably has a mid-round draft projection right now. I fully expect him, and I'm saying this now, and I said this actually months ago, I think that he's going to be a first-round pick by the end of this draft process. I think he could even be a top 10 pick. I think he has tremendous talent. We'll see how much he could put that talent on display at Miami. Like I said, that's kind of my question mark here, is the team that he's playing for, the college that he's playing for. But in terms of his individual talent, I don't think you're going to find a whole lot more talent in an individual than you will in Cam Ward. He can make every single throw. He's dynamic. Really love what he brings to the table, and I'm really excited about what he showed in this first matchup against the Gators.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Cam Ward has the upside to be the best quarterback in this draft class. There are some cons that I think it really is just going to come with experience and ironing out some deficiencies. But listen, when you watch him play, you see like the calmest player you've ever seen. The guy does not get phased. He went into one of the most hostile rivalries in college football, Miami versus Florida, and looked like he didn't even care. Looked like it didn't bother him at all. And he dominated Florida, and it didn't even look like he was putting in that much effort. He looked like he did it effortlessly, seamlessly, threaded the needle, tore them apart. He had 1 interception off a deflection, and at the end of the day, there are some things to iron out, right? The accuracy, there are things that will come with more reps and more experience this college season. The one thing I did not like about his game is that he tends to drift back a lot in the pocket. I'd like to see him step up into the pocket and be a little bit more assertive and navigate the interior workings. He does tend to drift, and then he tries to kind of sling it all arm, and you're going to get beat at times in the NFL. You're going to make bad throws. You're going to make bad decisions. He has to be more composed and moving into his progressions in the pocket, finding space in the pocket, standing tall. He drifts a lot. And the one thing that you can say about him, though, and there is a positive in that, is that he doesn't even need his lower body to make these throws. He has a cannon. He's similar to Aaron Rodgers in a way that he uses his upper body to generate an enormous amount of power. He can deliver a ball 50, 60 yards downfield with no lower body strength. He can do it just with the flick of a wrist. That's the type of power that he has in that arm talent. If he can just kind of harness that, become more of a pocket passer that's blended with a mobile, athletic freak who can run out of the pocket, throw across his body. He had that throw in the end zone across his body that was absolutely gorgeous. He found a streaker down the middle of the field, kind of a post going towards the pylon, nailed him between 2 defenders. He had some absolutely gorgeous NFL caliber throws. In this day and age in the NFL, you need a quarterback who can make off-platform throws. You need a quarterback who can get out of the pocket and make those types of plays happen. The rushing qualities are certainly there as well. I'd like to see him just be a little bit more patient in the pocket. Maneuver, sidestep, find time, keep his eyes downfield, and he will become a very dangerous player at the NFL level. I think as a rookie in the NFL, he'll go through those struggles, but with the right coaching, they can iron those things out of him. And I think he'll be more than fine. He does not get phased by big games. And if you're a Giants quarterback, you have to get used to playing in prime time. You have to get used to being in hostile environments. And I think that Cam Ward looks like he is ready for that type of challenge, ready to take on that type of kind of situation. So, yeah, if you're the Giants, Cam Ward is absolutely in the mix for me here. Any of those guys could be the guy that hits. The draft class next year obviously is not as good as it was this past season, but at the end of the day, you just never know. Guys emerge. Guys become great. Guys adapt better to the NFL. I mean, CJ Stroud was great at Ohio State, but nobody saw him coming in as a rookie and doing what he's doing right now. So, I do think that if you're the Giants, you just never know who's going to emerge in those scenarios. But, what did you see from Cam Ward in the sense that he has a lot of strengths? I think the development, there's certainly a lot to develop there, but the raw attributes, he could be a star if properly coached.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think he's got all the tools and the traits, and I'm glad that you mentioned potential risers like Jaden Daniels, because it seems like there's been a trend in each of the last few seasons where there has been a quarterback that wasn't necessarily getting that first-round buzz prior to the college football season, ends up turning in an incredible year, ends up becoming a top pick. Jaden Daniels was the one last year. Nobody viewed him as a potential Heisman candidate going into the season. Then he put up a Heisman Trophy winning season, and he ended up being the number 2 overall pick to the Washington Commanders, which again brings the point in. we have to do our due diligence on these guys, because if we weren't paying attention to Jaden Daniels all year and into the pre-draft process, well, now he's a Washington Commander. We've paid attention to him, so we know what his strengths and weaknesses are, and we know what the Giants might be facing in those divisional matchups. But I'll digress off that and just say with Cam Ward, this is a guy who you probably don't view right now as being necessarily a Heisman candidate, but what a performance in week one, like you said, in a hostile rivalry environment. If he keeps putting together performances like that, maybe by the end of the year, he does have his name in the Heisman Trophy mix. And once you get that Heisman Trophy award, you're usually a top pick in the NFL draft. So Cam Ward, one of those players with a lot of potential to rise, tools and traits galore. An NFL coach will love to have their hands on his talents and see what he can do at the next level. So really excited about him. Alex, I know with Jalen Milroe out of Alabama, you've had some interesting takes about him. He only threw the ball 9 times for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game. He did have 1 turnover-worthy play, according to Pro Football Focus. I'll point that out. On 9 attempts, you probably don't want to see a turnover-worthy throw be made when you only throw the ball 9 times. But he also hit 1 big-time throw, according to them. And again, 3 touchdowns on 7 completions. Pretty insane numbers. I think Jalen Milroe is going to be a really tough evaluation throughout the season. I think early on, a lot of people are going to have him as a top pick in this draft because he is an Alabama quarterback who does have a lot of talent, rushing ability as well. But I think it's going to be tough to project what his talent's going to translate to in the NFL just because of the offense that he runs. It's just going to be a little bit difficult to foresee how that skill set translates to a pro-style offense. And that's where I'm actually going to bring up 2 quarterbacks at once here, Alex, because I want to talk about Carson Beck as well. Because Carson Beck playing at Georgia runs a pro-style offense. And it's interesting to look at the differences between a guy who does run a pro-style offense and the guys who don't. Like Carson Beck running that pro-style offense, he's making throws from the pocket, under center. He's making throws that you see on NFL Sundays. And with Jalen Milroe, he's making some of those throws as well, but they're not happening as frequently, and he's not playing in an offense that looks anything like what you see on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays. So it's kind of interesting to highlight the 2 of those players. They're both they're both excellently talented, right? Really good, exciting young college football quarterbacks, but they're very different in many different ways. So Alex, what is your kind of take on both of those players, and what do you see in the differences between one of them who clearly plays in an offense that's more pro-style, like Carson Beck, and then one of them who plays in more of an RPO-heavy, college-based, college football offense like Jalen Milroe?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Jalen Milroe is probably one of those fallers in the draft because of his lack of sample of actual passing. I mean, Alabama quarterbacks like teams don't. I mean, look at Bryce Young, obviously the most recent one, but he failed, and they ran a pretty pass heavy offense. So I do think that Alabama quarterbacks historically have been major hit or miss guys. I think that Jalen Milroe is probably a 2nd, 3rd round pick because of that lack of real passing volume. But Carson Beck you watch him play, man. I watched that Georgia game, and the first half he was a little slow, it was kind of grinding the gears to get going. Clemson's defense is legit. And then the second half, they just dominated. And Carson Beck, what does he do really well? He can hit the deep passes, don't get me wrong. He is extremely accurate. He had a couple of passes, a couple that were behind his receivers at times, but shaking the rust off week 1, still had around a 70% completion rate. He set the record last year for the highest completion rate, like college football history, or maybe it was for Georgia history. But in any case, 23 completions, 33 attempts, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns. What he did was run a pro-style offense, like you said. What he did was hit the open receivers, get the ball efficiently to these guys in space, find the progressions. And what I love the most about Carson Beck is that when he decides to do something, it's out of his hand like that. He is extremely decisive. He doesn't second guess himself. He's extremely confident in his decision making, and he makes the right throws 99% of the time. He finds the open receivers. He does the right thing. There was one play where he got hit right in his face, and he sidearmed it from basically out of nowhere, like about to take a huge hit, side-armed it to a guy on a crossing route and got a completion. It was like maybe a 5-yard completion, but it was like, okay, the decisiveness, the ability to react on a blink of an eye, it's there for him. Like, he's got that ability, that vision, that reaction timing. That's part of what we have problems with Daniel Jones, that his reaction timing is slow sometimes. Sometimes he hesitates. Sometimes he doesn't see the open receivers. He doesn't take the easy option sometimes. A lot of times he's taking unnecessary risks. Carson Beck takes everything that defenses give him, right? Every single yard that opposing defenses are offering, he's like, thank you very much, that's mine. You know what I mean? Like that's sometimes what makes a really great quarterback, or really what it does is sets a floor, right? Like Patrick Mahomes is phenomenal, but his floor is tremendous because he takes every single yard that opposing defenses give him, right? He's like, all right, you're going to give me the space. I'm going to hand it off for 2 yards to Travis Kelce, let him do the work. Give it to Isaiah Pacheco and let him run a little bit on a screen pass. Give it to Rashee Rice on a crossing route. They run a very West Coast style offense with the Chiefs, but they also take the shots downfield when the opportunities arise. They're really good at communicating at the line of scrimmage and making those things happen, attacking weaknesses, but they really manage to just get yards where they're giving them out for free. Carson Beck does a tremendous job doing just that. He takes the weaknesses of a defense and turns it into production on easy, West Coast style dink and dunks, crossing concepts, very easy completions, but he can hit the deep ones too. And I think that is definitely something that people will say is a con to his game. He doesn't take enough deep shots, but he's more than capable of doing so. It's just more of like, why? You scored 34 points and you had a 70% completion rate. Why do you need to throw the ball deep if you're doing that, right? If we're scoring 30 points a game, I don't care how far the passes are. I just care that we're scoring points and we're doing it instrumentally. We're doing it with a strategy, with a purpose, and we're taking what the defense are giving us. So, that's what I do like about Carson Beck. He is in a pro-style offense. There are layers to his game that an offense in the NFL will add, but he has a tremendous floor to build off of, right? He's built the pillars. He's built the foundation. Now you build the second floor. You build the third floor. You build the windows. You build all the nice commodities you want in a house, but he's got the base level done. And I think that's what a lot of teams are looking for in an NFL quarterback, a guy coming into the league, is someone that comes with the foundation readily built. A lot of teams go in the direction of, we want the freaky nature of athleticism, we want the freak plays, the crazy this, crazy that, when they go into a pro-style offense and they can't operate correctly because that foundation is not built properly. They started building the windows and everything else before they built the foundation, so they're kind of doing it in reverse a lot of times. That's why a lot of people love CJ Stroud, because he had a really strong foundation built, and they just built on top of that. Carson Beck does give me a lot of the same vibes as like that. That is a strong player with a high floor, and then you just try to add the other layers on top of it. He's a sneaky athlete too. He can run a little bit. It's not his primary game, but he can move a little bit, and he's really, really talented when it comes to maneuvering in the pocket and buying himself time and getting the ball out quickly when he recognizes pressure, closing in. So, I think that's kind of what I saw from him in this first game, specifically in the second half. I think you probably agree to an extent. Like, this is a guy that is coming into the NFL next year with a very nice floor.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's got a nice floor, but I will say the Georgia offense, it's breeded some quarterbacks in recent years, like Stetson Bennett, for an example. He's a guy that plays very pro style, can make all the throws, takes what the defense gives him, but at the NFL level, I mean, we just saw him, what do you have, like 3 or 5 interceptions or whatever in that preseason game playing for the Rams. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily translate, and it is manufactured, because I like a lot from Carson Beck. What I need to see more from him throughout the rest of the year: can he do things when the defense isn't giving him yardage, right? Is he able to play outside of the Georgia offense system? Is he really just a system quarterback, or is he a really good pro-style quarterback? Those are the questions that I need answered by season's end. But a really strong performance in the first game, stood strong in the pocket, made some layered throws across the middle of the field, which you love to see from college quarterbacks. It's very tough to throw over the middle of the field. He made some really nice throws over the middle. I loved what I saw from him, loved his pocket presence. On Jalen Milroe, though, Alex, got to keep in mind he was playing out against Western Kentucky University. Alabama's always going to stomp a smaller school like that. That's going to be the case. I mean, they have some decent players, not to slight Western Kentucky, but what I'm trying to make the point here is Jalen Milroe only threw 9 passes. When he goes up against a bigger school, when we get an Alabama versus Georgia matchup, something like that, maybe in the college football playoffs, we're going to see Jalen Milroe have to do more. How does he respond to that? Is he still a runner and a quarterback, a dual threat, or can he make these plays from the pocket that we need to see from an NFL QB? What I really do like about Jalen Milroe, though, he does have a little bit of that Lamar Jackson to him. Like, they run a lot of designed quarterback runs. He had 2 rushing touchdowns in this game this weekend. He picked up a bunch of yards on the ground. He broke some tackles. He fought through contact. He has a little bit of that Lamar Jackson to him. Now, can he expand on that? Can he be a pocket passer the same way that Lamar is? Again, not comparing him to Lamar necessarily, but just the way that Alabama used him and used him on those designed quarterback runs. that was interesting. Definitely think they're borrowing some elements from what they've seen in Baltimore with the Ravens. So very interesting stuff there. Two other players that I want to bring up, Alex, and I think that we've pretty much rounded out the majority of these top guys that we want to discuss. But I do want to talk about Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss. Shout out to Eli Manning, Ole Miss alum. Jackson Dart was phenomenal. He had 5 touchdowns, 418 yards. He didn't have a single interception nor a turnover-worthy throw, according to Pro Football Focus. And I also want to talk about Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU. These are two guys who, again, very low on the draft boards right now. A lot of intangible traits, a lot of talent, could absolutely rise up the draft boards, put themselves into that top pick conversation if they have these really big years like a Jaden Daniels just did. And that's why I like Garrett Nussmeier to do it, because he's playing with a ton of talented players at LSU. If you want to take it from the Giants' perspective, he's played with Malik Neighbors and thrown him the rock several times. That's interesting connection right there. And also just the fact that he's playing in the SEC, he's playing for LSU. LSU has had a few of these late risers recently. Jaden Daniels, the most recent one. Joe Burrow a few seasons ago. Nobody had him on the draft board in week 1 of that college football season. Historic Heisman Trophy winning year. Boom. Number 1 overall pick. One of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Could we see something similar from Garrett Nussmeier? Now, I'm not saying necessarily that we will or we won't, but what I am saying, really strong performance in week 1. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 304 yards. Again, not statistically amazing, but if you watch the clips or if you watched the game, you could see a lot of those throws that make you say, okay, in an NFL level, that pass translates, right? Like that's a good throw to a good receiver. You could see that working at the next level for him. So, want to just point out Garrett Nussmeier and say keep an eye on him, Giants fans, for the long term of the season, and also on Jackson Dart, a guy who caught a lot of buzz last year towards the end of the year, also playing for a good school and a good conference, makes all the throws, has a really strong arm. So Alex, those two guys, Jackson Dart, Garrett Nussmeier, maybe anybody else that you think could be a potential riser in this draft process, what are your thoughts on those guys?
Jackson Dart looked phenomenal, as you mentioned. He was really throwing that ball with efficiency, with accuracy. His deep ball is legit. As you said, 418 yards, 5 touchdowns. The deep ball was gorgeous, like 92% adjusted completion rate. The guy throws just, it's a pretty ball, to be quite honest with you. But I do think that there are limitations to his game. Obviously, he has a little bit of athleticism, 81.5% completion rate. I mean, they dominated against, bad opponent, but at the end of the day, the guy just tore it apart. I think this is someone that could be absolutely a nice riser. I'm excited to continue watching him and breaking him down. I didn't know much about him heading into, kind of looking at the tape from yesterday and watching, just the dominance that he put on display. But I'm excited to keep kind of watching the progression there if he rises up this draft board. Quinn Ewers, another guy I don't think you mentioned, someone that a lot of people like, a lot of people hate. I don't necessarily love him. I think Arch Manning stepped in and looked even better when he had his 5 completions on 6 attempts for 95 yards and a touchdown. Instrumental, was absolutely phenomenal. I wish Arch was in this upcoming draft class, but obviously not. Garrett Nussmeier, you said, 304 yards, 2 touchdowns. What I loved the most, 29 completions on a 76.3% completion rate. The guy just was throwing the freaking rock, and he was making the most of his opportunity, so he could absolutely be a riser. Another guy you didn't mention was Drew Allar out of Penn State, 11 completions on 17 attempts. I know a lot of people are going to say, I love Drew Allar in the comments. I can already feel it. 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. What Allar does bring, the guy's elite arm talent. I mean, the accuracy, kind of gives me Josh Allen vibes from a long time ago. From Wyoming, this is a guy who can make every throw with his strength. He's an underrated athlete. He had a lot of yards on the ground too. But this is someone that if he gets control of that arm, if he can become a high octane passing guy with good accuracy, he's going to be a big time riser in this draft class. So keep an eye on Drew Allar. I don't think he's a guy that's first round right now, but I could see him sneaking his way in with a really, really strong season. But right now, a lot of good performances from the quarterbacks in week 1 of college football. I think that the Giants, next year, if this is the direction they end up going in, barring a masterclass from Daniel Jones this year, there's going to be some really interesting decisions to make. Which kind of quarterback do they want to go with? The guy with the high floor, like a Carson Beck, a high upside like a Shedeur Sanders, or even a superstar upside with Cam Ward, who has some things he needs to iron out. And coming off a season, obviously he was down, but now with Miami bringing that organization, bringing that college kind of scene back to life, I do think that there is a lot of talent, a lot of upside, going to be risers and fallers, but there's always a really good quarterback, even in weak classes. There's always a guy that emerges from the ashes a lot of times, and even good classes, guys don't end up panning out all the time. So, if you're the Giants going into this, you just look at the guys that are rising and who has the highest floor, who could be that superstar level potential quarterback. And of course, the Giants are doing all the due diligence, just as we are right now in this episode, preparing for the future in any case. And I think it's just a fun way to keep up with the times, keep up with the quarterbacks that are going to be in the draft class next year. But also, you'll be getting regular episodes about the Giants and their season every single day from us as well. So don't worry about that.
Yeah, every single day we are breaking down the New York Giants. Today we want to take a little break, and we're going to continue to do this throughout the season. Take a look at college football, talk about some of these guys that could make an impact for the team next year potentially, or be on their radar. And hey, maybe we'll even do this for some of the other positions. Drop it below if you want us to look at guards or tackles throughout the year who are rising up the draft board. Maybe there's a right tackle who could easily replace Evan Neal and be a superstar for us. Let us know. Keep an eye on these college football players the same way we will. It's due diligence for the Giants, for the NFL. Just let us know in the comments your feedback on this type of content. And if you want us to take a look at more college football players and maybe just do kind of throughout the year some sort of draft coverage, because I think that's always important, have that preparation going into the NFL draft in April. So that's going to be a lot of fun, but obviously a lot to talk about this week, Alex. We're going to be talking matchups. We're going to be talking about keys to winning. We're going to be talking about potential sleepers for the season. All of that fun stuff with the New York Giants preparing to face the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday afternoon. Alex, before we wrap this thing, I got to know, which matchup outside of the Giants versus Vikings game on Sunday are you most excited to watch? I'm going to tell you, it's for me, Thursday night, Ravens versus Chiefs.
Oh, yeah.
What a great start to the NFL season. Really happy with the schedule makers for that one. I can't wait to watch that game.
Oh, that's going to be such a fun one. The other one that I really am excited to watch is the Jets and 49ers on Monday night, too. Those two games, prime time, either end of the week. That's how you do it, man. You sandwich all the other games between those two absolute freaking gems. So I'm really, really excited. Even Rams-Lions, that's a good game. Cowboys-Browns might be interesting. Of course, there's some other ones. Texans-Colts, get a first look at Anthony Richardson coming back from the injury. There's a lot of really, really good games.
Too. That's a good
against
matchup.
CJ Stroud.
Richardson versus
really
Stroud.
Good.
That's fun.
Even Falcons-Steelers could be interesting too. Packers-Eagles, that's going to be a great game. Jordan Love, see how he rebounds after coming off one of his, really exciting season where he got that contract extension. There's a lot of good football, my friends. Week 1, they've dialed it up. It's going to be an absolute gem. Thursday night, Ravens-Chiefs. What a great way! We'll be putting some bets in too. Don't worry, on BetUS. So we got you guys covered. We're gonna do some. We'll do something tomorrow and figure out what we like for that game. So it'll be fun to tail with you guys.
No doubt. Can't wait. It's just going to be a really fun weekend upcoming, but it's going to be a really fun season. As you guys know, we've been doing this over 5 years now on Fireside Giants, and we're hoping to do it for another 5, 10, 15, 20, however long you guys want us to keep doing it. This is going to be a fun one. Whether the Giants are amazing this year or they stink, we'll be hitting you guys with the daily uploads anyway. You know the drill. So a lot of fun talking about the college football week 1 and the quarterbacks that we saw this weekend. Some of those standout performances. Again, going to continue to do that throughout the year, but getting ready for an exciting NFL season. So stick with us. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.